Hello everyone, so welcome to the second video of the video series about the financial principles on budgeting. So budgeting is a concept that I think most people think about related to saving money, but I want to stress on the point that it's not just about saving money, it's about spending it, it's about where it goes, where does it come in. All these things come into play when you're actually thinking about budgeting. I want to start this session off with a question to you as an audience. Who do you think saves the most money in the world? So I'll give you a few seconds, and I'll just announce the answer after these few seconds. So the answer is actually China. I don't know if you've guessed it, but in 2015, China had a savings rate of roughly 47%. As a percentage to their GDP, which is basically how much economic products that the country has produced, and it has a very, very significant saving rate compared to the rest of the world. So please check out the website I have included as in the description for you to see what is the saving rate to the GDP in your country. And I want you to look at this because I want you to think about what is your own personal saving rate. Like, do you even know what your saving rate is? So how much money, you might know how much money you have at the bank, but do you know how much in percentages every couple weeks perhaps that your paycheck goes into your bank account? How much in percentage do you leave behind? So I want you to think hard about that and actually think about whether you're doing above the country standards, above other countries, or even perhaps even above the standards that we're seeing in China. Once you know sort of your rough saving rate is currently, that's where we can get started to actually understand how you can either do better or perhaps you're already doing well. Then I'll congratulate you right now. But now let's look at a different example. So you can see here, I've named these two fictional characters, but these are actually few of my clients that has a very similar profile that I would show you. So on the left, you see that Big City Bob, let's call him, with an income of roughly $60,000 in income, and he lives in Toronto, Ontario. Versus on the right side, we'll call him Small Town Steve, with $40,000 income and living in the city of Waterloo, Ontario. So with comparing these two different characters, who do you think would be able to save more money at the end of the day? So on one hand, someone making $60,000 but living in Toronto versus someone else making $45,000 living in Waterloo. So the answer, I'll just quickly give you the answer right now, that Small Town Steve was actually able to save more money coming out ahead compared to Big City Bob. Now let's go over the details, right? I want to show you the magic of how the numbers are actually coming into play when Small Town Steve was actually, making $15,000 less than Big City Bob. So how is he actually doing that? Let's start with Bob making $60,000 living in Toronto first. So you can see that netting taxes, CPP, these are Canadians' mandatory costs that you just have to pay to the government, which nets. So you can look at the details of what's been taken out that I've calculated through an online sort of calculators. You can see that he's ending up with $3,781. Now with expenses, he's paying roughly $3,450 and leaving him over around $331 by the end of the month. Now if you want to take deeper, I'll just explain sort of more of the context of this person because I actually know this client. He's paying a one-bedroom bachelor suite in Toronto, so paying around $1,400 a month for that. He's paying quite a bit for transportation because he is actually trying to pay off one of his hobbies of a bike that he owns but he doesn't really use, and a transportation pass that he uses to get to work. So that totals to $800. For food, he spends roughly around $750 because in the city he doesn't really like to cook, so he eats out quite often with a mix of going to restaurants and bringing home some small meals that he can prep. And entertainment includes his spending, that ranges from clothes, from video games that he buys, so various items that kind of adds up to a sizable amount of money at the end of the month. So that nets out to around $331. On the other hand, we see small town Steve with 45K income living in Waterloo. So after taxes, after all those things, you can see he's making quite a bit less than what Bob is making. So he nets out to roughly $2,953, so roughly $800 less on the month-to-month basis, but his spending is drastically lower. So he's paying $700 living accommodations. So that is, yes, he's not getting the same, you can argue that he's not living the same quality of standards. So he's living with roommates, through roommates, for paying around $700 in Waterloo. He cooks a lot, so Steve is more of a guy that likes to meal prep, and just a typical guy that likes to actually stay at home and make meals. Transportation, so quite similar in cost. That's mainly due to just buying a transit pass. And for Steve, he has a gym membership, if I recall, in all the total cost, but doesn't really purchase any sort of like access entertainment, but which I actually do encourage him not to be too frugal on himself. But this is his chosen lifestyle, so it's not something that I sort of sway. But at the end of the day, you can see after all those costs, you can see Steve is left with $1,328. So if you really compare between Bob and Steve, one is left with $331, the other is left with almost 4 times the amount of money. Like, it's amazing that you can see how is someone making less money being able to sort of save that much more money at the end of a month. And that all comes down to budgeting. It all comes down to how you're choosing to leverage your expenses and how you are planning out your money. I'm not necessarily saying that you have to be frugal and save, cut down all your costs down to the bone, but I'm mainly stressing out on the fact that you have to start being able to understand where is most of your money going towards when you are actually planning out your expenses. So that's a key part of budgeting, is actually knowing where that money is going. Because once you know where that money is going, you can have a lot more ways for you to think about, I want to control my expenses to this amount. So what can I move around within the budget that allows me to do that? So that's really crucial. Now you may actually ask me, how can I start? And I actually would recommend you to check out lots of great resources online on budgeting. There's lots of apps that you can use. Some people may prefer spreadsheets like I do. I'm a spreadsheet fanatic, partially due to work, but there's lots of different resources that you can use for you to be actually tracking every dollar that goes into your money. And the objective is really get to see, just like how I've shown sort of a general view of what Steve and Bob is actually spending and making on a monthly basis. And that way you don't have to do it regularly, but you have to at least do it once for you to actually understand, oh my God, am I keep losing money every month? Or am I saving even remarkably any money for anything? Like, those are key questions for you to answer before you actually think about the first video, which is actually using that money and actually start investing it. Lastly, how much should you save? That's really a question that actually goes to our last video, which is, what is your goal? And I don't want to talk too much about that right now, but it really comes down to how big is your goal? what's the timeline of it, and that's actually when you can actually walk back your plan to actually plan, this is the X amount of money that I would need for me to reach that goal. So those are all the key things that I've talked about today regarding budgeting. I hope it helps you understand better about what budgeting is, what are the ways for me to start, and I'm actually very excited to see you next time when you actually see our final video talking about goal settings. So thanks again.